I was watching a rerun of the 2022 National Championship of the 2021 season, Georgia, Alabama, the one where Keely Ringo picks it off. And it got me thinking about this team, and it got me thinking about how the 2024 Georgia Bulldogs have struggled on offense, and how now there are even more question marks on that side of the football due to Carson Beck's injury. And we've just seen, assuming that Carson is going to be out, and that's just what it looks like for this playoff run, we really don't know what the offense will completely look like. I obviously did a pretty deep dive on what it looks like with Gunnar Stockton, but we don't know how Gunnar Stockton and this Georgia offense will perform when this is the game plan, when this is the offense and Gunnar has the keys. There are question marks around it. As much as you can believe, I can believe, there are legitimate questions around Georgia's offense, and it starts with the quarterback position at this point because we don't know if Carson's going to be playing. And I was thinking about, you watch that Georgia defense in Alabama, and you see Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, you just see 13, 14 NFL guys on the screen at once on one side of the football, and it was just absolutely ridiculous. And this is clearly not that, right? Georgia's 2024 team, and there's no team like that. On one side, on one unit, there is no team like that, at least that I'm aware of, that's that dominant, and especially not in this college football season. And it's just got me thinking, is Georgia's defense going to be good enough down the stretch? Is Georgia's defense going to be able to put up 3 performances where it makes the offense struggle, it wins you games? We just watched Georgia's defense play extremely well against Texas. Kind of a bend but don't break, right? And you get help with a couple of missed field goals, but they only allow 1 touchdown to the Longhorns. And it was that long explosive play there towards the end of the game to Moore. I forget his first name, but to Moore, number 0 on Texas's receiving group. So we've seen that they can do that. We saw them do that to Texas before. But this team has been that, right? On both sides of the football, it's been that. And this is a little bit more about the defense, but this team has been all over the place, and that's kind of the difference between this one and the past ones. And this is not a direct comparison to what they were because it's just not the same thing, but it is a blueprint for what wins national championships. Last year, the team that won the national championship was the Michigan Wolverines. Why? Great defense, right? I mean, they were just absolutely stacked on defense, and some of those guys are still on the roster, right? Like Mason Graham and Will Johnson, but they had a plethora of studs on the defensive side of the football, and they held opponents to close to 10 points per game, and that's how they got to where they were, and that's how they beat Alabama, and that's how they beat Washington and won the national championship. They beat a really, really good Washington offense that had Michael Penix Jr. and Roma Dunze and all those other NFL guys. Is Georgia's defense good enough for this run to put up these performances? Is my real question. Ryan Clear from Dawg Post discussing this. I don't know if I can answer that question for you, but we're at least going to discuss this here. Newsletter for Dawg Post is down below. I won't waste too much time, but just check it out and at least click on the link down below and at least give us a look. And I appreciate those who already have. A lot of car videos during the month of December. Just be prepared for that. I won't always be at my home office just because of hanging out with family, right? So that's just what it is. So I'll be doing a lot of videos from the car. I'm going to crank out a lot of my office here over the next few days, though. This defense is one that has allowed, it started off great, right? I'm looking at the schedule right now, and I'll also pull up what they've allowed. It's over 20 points per game, what Georgia's allowed on defense, which is good for, it's top 50 in the country, right? These are just off the top of my head, but what I'm looking at is the schedule, and so I can give you exact numbers. They start off hot, 3 points, and 12 points against those first 3 teams, Clemson, Tennessee Tech, and Kentucky. They didn't allow a touchdown in those first 3 games. And at this point, you're like, oh, man, is this the unit? Is this going to be a unit that they can just dominate with, that they have in the past? That's kind of what it looked like. And then go down to Tuscaloosa. Take a trip down to Tuscaloosa, and they let up 41 points. They let up 28 in the first 18, 19 minutes of the game. I rewatched a little bit of that recently too, just to see what happened. And what happened was Jalen Milroe and and Ryan Williams, and they just, Georgia's defense crumbled on that day, right? And they allowed a lot of points. Good defensive performance against Auburn. They allowed the one explosive touchdown run to Jarquez Hunter, a couple of bad tackles, and he breaks it and ends up scoring on that play, but then it was just 2 field goals. So in the first 4 out of 5 games, Georgia's defense was great. Bend but don't break, only allowing field goals, only allowed 1 touchdown outside of the Alabama game where they allowed all that. So you look at this first half of the season, and you're thinking this is going to be a great defensive performance, and then Mississippi State happens, and then they get the Texas performance, so it's just kind of all over the place. But Georgia's defense over the course of the year, it started playing a little bit worse. Pretty good defensive performance against Tennessee in the second half, right? Against Ole Miss, it wasn't a bad defensive performance. It just wasn't good enough to overcome what was going on offense for Georgia. UMass, not okay, and I'll get into that in a second. They allowed 21 points, but there's more to that. Georgia Tech, they allowed 44 points. Obviously, some of that coming in regulation, some of that being in overtime. 27 points in regulation is what they allowed. And then they held Texas to 19 points. So this is all over the place, and it's inconsistent. The things that cannot happen is they cannot allow teams to run the football super successfully against them if they want to win football games. The proof is in the pudding of this season. Texas, it's hard to boil it down to one main thing. I've discussed, to me, what I think the most important statistics were in seeing, hey, this is why Georgia beat Texas both times. They repeated it. But holding Texas to 29 yards rushing and 39 yards rushing in those 2 games, it tells you a lot of the story. They could not move the football on the ground. It was only through the air. And when you're completely one-dimensional, it's hard to beat a team that at the end of the day just probably has more NFL talent than you, and that's the case with Georgia. So that didn't happen in all the games. Against Kentucky, when Georgia's offense was sputtering, and this is my point here, is can the defense carry it if Georgia's offense can't put together good performances? Now, this season, we've only really seen Gunnar Stockton against Texas, which is one of the best defenses in college football. So this is not an in-depth discussion about the defense, as I've said, or about the offense, as I said. It's about the defense, and will it allow 200 rushing yards again, like it did against UMass, or like it did against Georgia Tech? If, like against Kentucky, the offense can't function the way that it had in most of the other games, will the defense be good enough to hold another team to 4 field goals and hold off the opponent? Those are my questions. They're playing Notre Dame or Indiana. I think it'll be Notre Dame, right? I have a hard time seeing. I think it'll be very tough to beat these teams on the road in the first round of the playoffs, particularly with Notre Dame. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. I do think that Notre Dame's a better football team than Indiana, and so I'm leaning there. The one that I'm kind of interested in seeing is Tennessee at Ohio State. I think the Vols can win that game. But in this case, I do think Notre Dame is going to win that football game, most likely, and it's a team that can really run the ball, right? Between Love and Riley Leonard, it's a good running attack, and it's not extremely dissimilar from what Georgia Tech is able to do. Is that going to be a problem for this Georgia defense? It has been. It was against Alabama. It was against Georgia Tech in terms of dealing with the running quarterback. That's not what Indiana is, and Georgia would match up better against Indiana. But I think it'll be Notre Dame. And then if they get past that, defensively, I think that Georgia could hold Penn State, which is who I would think would make it that far. I would assume that Penn State beats SMU, makes it to the next round, and beats Boise State. I was about to blank on who they're going to play. That's what I would think is going to happen. Whether it's Boise State or Penn State, are they going to be able to hold all these good running backs? Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, and Ashton Jeanty, the best running back in college football. After they already had to deal with Notre Dame or Indiana, can they do it again? This is assuming, hey, the offense might not be what it should be or won't be super explosive. I don't know the answer to that. Like I said, we don't know if it will or won't be. Erring on the side of caution, it's probably not going to be as great with Carson, and that's probably the reason why Carson was out there, but we don't know that for sure. Can this defense hold these teams? And then if it does make it to the national championship and it has to play Oregon, who I just have a hard time seeing Oregon lose, or Texas again. Can it do it to Texas again? Could it do it to Ohio State or Tennessee again, right? That's the question with this team. Will the defense be able to carry it while there are so many question marks on offense? Now, we might run into a scenario where there aren't a lot of questions on offense and the defense can be just good enough to do it, but we don't know that at this point. And I think it's something to think about. Thanks for watching.